Welcome to the Braeburn Whisky podcast. My name is Jacob Daniels. I'm one of the portfolio directors here at Braeburn Whisky. And we have with us today Steve and Marijn, who are clients of ours who've invested and bought casks of whisky.
Thank you.
For various different reasons.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Just happened to be in Barcelona just for the fun of it. Gave you a call and went, hey, you did say that if we were in the area. So yeah.
You're always welcome. So why whiskey? What was it that attracted you to sort of whiskey initially?
No, the answer is easy, isn't it? It's why not?
Yeah.
Okay, whiskey is whiskey. Been drinking it for years, I suppose. I don't know. What started off for us, we have our own podcast, which deals with sort of technology. And we were trying to work out what was going to sort of make it interesting for people. And so we did our research. There was no podcast doing tech and whiskey. No. And we did that. We'd been drinking whiskey for a long time before that, of course. And so that actually made us get more and more involved with the whiskey industry and really understanding it. And it was very interesting. And Marijn, of course, is very much into his investments, his cryptos and his stocks and shares, and you guys connected, and I think that's where the first connection came in.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So, and you're both sort of looking at whiskey, at cask ownership for very different reasons, aren't you, if I understood correctly?
True. So for me, it's mainly diversifying my portfolio. I've been into stocks for quite some time. I've been into Bitcoin and all that crypto recently as well. But yeah, I saw the opportunity to buy a barrel, and then of course, why not? It's what I like. Worst case scenario, if I can't sell it, I'll drink it. So that's better than you can do with your Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes to zero tomorrow,
it's literally zero.
Yeah.
I hear that quite often. Funnily enough, a lot of people that take that approach. Well, if the chips really do fall, we can always drink it. And how about yourself, Steve? You're sort of completely different approach.
Yeah, we had a long conversation on this, didn't we, when we first kind of worked out that we there's a barrel that might suit me. I just like the whole industry. Marijn and I chat around some of our stuff. He's managed to go to a few places in Scotland. I haven't. I've been to Ireland where he hasn't, and getting involved in the distilleries and the people in the whole process. So yes, this to me is hey, I own a barrel of whiskey. That's a good investment. No, sod the investment. I own a barrel of whiskey, which is dead cool to drop into conversations. So yes, it's cool. But I think over the last few days, we were also doing the maths. Having spoke to you a few days ago on this, thinking, this is how much it'd be worth. And my jaw dropped as I suddenly realised, this actually is going to be both a good financial investment. So from my perspective, though, I was really interested in the barrel. So I've got a great 11-year-old barrel, which I actually tasted in a whiskey store last night. I found the right aged whiskey here in Barcelona. So I had a taste of it. That's what it tastes like, because I haven't had a chance to go and touch the cask.
Well, this is I was going to say. You're always. It's interesting that you've got two different approaches, and it seems like you're sort of maybe sort of arriving at a sort of point where you're in it for the same reasons. I say this because we have a lot of people that are sort of just whiskey fans. And like yourself, then sort of actually discover this is a very, very worthwhile investment as well. And of course, when it comes to drinking the whiskey, you're always welcome to join us up in Craigellachie and tuck into your actual cask. So it was a nice thing to do. Do you think you'll bottle any of your whiskey, or was it just purely for an investment perspective?
Well, I was actually under the impression that it was either selling the whole cask or bottling the whole cask. But we got into talking yesterday, and apparently there could be some kind of arrangement where you could say, okay, I'll take 100 or 50 bottles out of it and then sell the rest of the cask.
Well, it's fantastic to have that sort of, even if it's only a few bottles, and they are literally unique to you. There's nowhere else in the world are you going to find these particular bottles of whiskey. My only advice to you there would be, if you consider doing that, what you want to have is a cask that's left behind. After you've taken your bottles, a cask that's still viable as an investment. If there's not a great deal of volume there, it's going to be unattractive. But when the time comes, we can talk about that and make it. And you could do the same as well, Steve. Still enjoy your whiskey and actually show yourself a nice profit as well on the back of it.
Yeah, we were already dreaming about how would we export it? How would we get in touch with the right whiskey people in order to sell it? And how can we get it in shops and stuff like that? So it's great to also think about those things, because we're both business owners. So we're always thinking about great possibilities and yeah.
Let's be honest. I got a barrel of whiskey. I know what whiskey tastes like. I know where it came from. I know the fact that somebody literally shoveled in the barley and heated it and boiled it to create this. Or I get a crypto, which is a kind of 256 long number that is supposed to mean something. Okay, so fun. So yeah, real investment. I mean, it's like buying a house, isn't it? You know, I am investing in a house, and it's physically bricks and mortar. I get to see it, and there's something about that.
And I think we find that as well. It's sort of a lot of people don't have the same sort of trust they used to have in financial institutions, and given what we've experienced over the past couple of years, a lot of people are looking for an alternative to the more traditional investments, stocks markets, less traditional investments like Bitcoin, although Bitcoin's almost considered a more traditional investment nowadays.
These days, yeah.
But not as much fun as whiskey, I'd have to agree with that. In terms of Braeburn Whisky itself, how have you found be careful what you say here, guys, but be honest,
we will be
obviously.
very honest.
How have you found the experience dealing with myself and Braeburn Whisky?
Oh, we said we wouldn't talk about this because we don't want to upset anyone.
No.
It's brilliant. Seriously.
I think it was good because we talked before, and I wasn't at first. I was interested in it, but I wasn't ready to make that financial commitment, because when I'm dealing with my stocks or with my crypto, I'm dealing with €100, €500, things like that. So of course, getting a barrel is slightly bigger investment. So I didn't have that laying around. But you were very patient. You were keeping up with me, keeping tabs. So calling me every 3 months, 6 months. And we always had a really chill, relaxed talk about it. I know I also send you like a list of 10 questions that I had at some point. Like I was getting ready, I had the money, but then, I don't know. I can go to the store and buy the actual whiskey, but here I'm talking to a guy on the phone. I haven't met him in real life. I know it's a company, Braeburn, but I'm sending you a few €1,000 of money. So how can I know that I can trust you? And that was really great. You gave me really good answers on that, and that really pushed me to say, okay, let's go for that. And I just said to Steve as well while we were sitting downstairs in your amazing lounge, if I would have seen this, if this would be in my hometown, for example, and I would walk by, I would just walk in, and I would, and then that waiting time would be way shorter for me, because then I would say, this is an actual organization. There are people working here. You've got all these nice whiskey bits everywhere. Then I'm convinced it builds that trust for me.
Great. It's really pleasing to hear. I know, with the sort of difficulties that we've had over the past couple of years, and none of us have really been able to get together like we would like to. That's, fingers crossed, changing. So we're really pleased about now the opportunity to have, sit down with you guys and just give our clients the opportunity to see what we're about. And we all, I think this is why we understand that it can be a leap of faith, investing sort of significant sums of money with people that you've never met before. So excellent. I'm really pleased to hear that it's been a good experience. And how about yourself, Steve?
Well, I think it has value. This building really is special. So if people get the chance to come and visit, and I know you welcome anybody if they're in the area, it adds a level of assurance that this is an organisation that's, the building is fabulous. It really is well designed. Seeing people shouting and dealing in the background, and it suddenly dawned on me this morning as I walked in. We do a lot of work with various industries as part of what we do together, and including banks. And you get a feeling of the investment side of it and the bank side of it here when you walk in, and it's not just a bar side of it. So that interesting combination. So the building is very much assuring that actually, yes, it's there and done. Great. But in terms of working with you, I really enjoyed this week because we closed a deal on another barrel this week. Right. And I was in a meeting. I was on a Teams meeting, and I saw your email come in. So they always get looked at, and I'm going, yeah, that's my barrel. It was in my price range, so I was right what I was looking for. It was unusual. It was peated, and I think within 2 minutes of the email coming, you'd got I'll have one of those. Make it this one.
And it was a really nice cask, by the way. I mean, those elements, the peat.
Yeah.
Because obviously we're only typically, I mean, you've got a couple of Highland sort of distillers, but typically it's an Isla sort of characteristics. And then the Oloroso cask, I mean, I'm sure we all know how well received sherry whiskies are. You went for the bourbon cask?
Yeah, peated in the bourbon cask.
Oh, there you go. That was also an excellent choice.
No, but that's the point, though. It was my choice, wasn't it? Yeah, so your email was very clear. This is what's available, and I made the choice, and it was good to go in, which was completely contrast to the first time, which took us about 6 weeks to close the deal because of various things. But that's part of the game. I mean, this is money we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Braeburn Whisky is essentially a family company. And again, it's a shame that we don't get or we haven't had the opportunity to do this more often, but that's obviously changing. But I think we from Braeburn Whisky would really like our clients to realise that we are fundamentally a family business and that we're a whiskey company. And as I said to you earlier, that given the amount of people now that are sort of looking at this as an alternative investment sort of asset, we obviously need to have a little bit of an understanding about the financial markets and that sort of side of it, which is specifically what we're here to do at Braeburn Whisky. So I'm really pleased that you've enjoyed yourselves and the experience up to now. I understand you have some questions for me, Steve.
I did have one or two about the sort of organisation in terms of where you go. We obviously have a great website, so we get to see our investment and the price and things. I always quite like to get some depth behind that because I'm in the interesting side. For him, this is another Bitcoin. It's an investment, and he's also, of course, he has a fresh distillation, so he has 3 years to wait before he can do much with it.
Yeah.
Although saying that, we did want to get a sample, didn't we? Talked about it, so you'd be able to compare what the new make was like compared to what it would be like in 3 years. So we're going to kind of arrange those things. Yeah. But for me, I was kind of aligning this to kind of an antique desk. I buy an antique desk as an investment, and it will get older and make more money. But it will also be more money if I knew who bought it and who made it and what house it was in. So for me, I kind of miss, knowing who cut the wood to make the barrel on what date and who tarred it. And the kind of backstory to the whiskey. So it was a question we had earlier, but as you said, you don't always have the information yourselves.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and it is, when we were investing in casks of whiskey, these storied distilleries, there's a great amount of history. Quite often these distilleries the towns only exist because of the distillery. So there is a lot of history and in terms of the provenance of the cask. We're really reliant upon the fact that HMRC run the show, and we all know how efficient they are at collecting their taxes, and obviously the Scottish Whisky Association. I think the industry is so important to both Scotland and the United Kingdom. We're all very confident of the provenance, and there's never with bottles. There's been sort of these stories about fake bottles turning up on the market. That's obviously an issue if you're sort of buying bottles as an investment. But with the casks of whiskey, they're all stored in these really secure, safe environments, and the Scottish Whisky Association obviously protects the provenance of the whiskey because it's so important to their economy. But in terms of the history of a single cask, an individual cask, it's quite difficult because the reality is there are millions of these casks of whiskey, and they get moved around from there's from distillery to warehouse. We try and keep that down to an absolute minimum. We don't really want to be moving casks of whiskey about, but we tend to get just sort of basically a line on a spreadsheet that tells us the cask type. But again, there are standards. If it's a first fill, we talked about charring and toasting earlier. The first fill, it's unlikely we'll have had that treatment. But then with second fills and third fills, you can sometimes look at the distillery's policy on their cask to get an idea of whether or not that was charred or whether it was toasted. But yeah, unfortunately, even within the industry, we work on fairly limited information as to the sort of where that cask has been and who previously owned it.
I think Braeburn's shown that they're innovators in this space, so I shall look forward to your changes when you sit there.
Yes.
I mean, it would be simple, like second fill. Click on the second fill. What does second fill mean?
Yeah. Well, so you guys probably know a little bit more about this than I do, given your managing sort of Bitcoin, this sort of thing. But we are going to be, now we're really into witchcraft and wizardry, NFTs. So
we talked about that half a year ago.
Did we?
We did, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Because I told you that story that I just told here as well. Like, it's my initial few thousand euros as an investment. And that was kind of the thing that slowed me down in order to make that decision. So if you could like cut it up in a number of parts, that would make it more easy to make that decision. Then it would only be a few €100 maybe.
You mean in terms of the accessibility of the investment?
Exactly.
It's an interesting point, this, and there are a couple of companies that I'm aware of that sort of have this what we'd call fractional ownership model. We are really uncomfortable with it because without getting too sort of stuck down with the technicalities, essentially that cask of whiskey is on the balance sheet of the company that you're sort of making this partial investment or this sort of this partial investment in the cask. So there has to be some sort of quorum on what happens with that cask in the future. So, the options that we've talked about, they're not really available to you when you're approaching it in that way, this fractional ownership model. And the other thing that makes us really uncomfortable with that approach is the fact that cask is on the balance sheet of the company that you're dealing with. And this is really important to a lot of our investors, that autonomy. It's your cask of whiskey, it's your asset. Our role after you've bought that cask of whiskey is obviously to sort of give that whiskey the best chance it can to be the best whiskey it can when it reaches a ripe old age, which is why obviously we've got Dave and the team up there at Craig Ellicky. But it's really important that it's your cask of whiskey. I doubt that it's going to happen in my lifetime, but if there was some sort of reason for us to no longer be here as a company, then you've got all the assurances that you need, that you sort of knock on the door of the warehouse and they'll know who you are. And you say, my cask of whiskey's over here. And they'll go, yes, of course it is.
Bring a fan.
2.
So one of the other things that we were talking about is, again, this provenance, and it's a really nice element. I can completely understand that. How can you track, what's history, what's the story behind my cask of whiskey? But I get the impression that what we can do then with the NFTs is track that provenance, and you can sort of take that NFT and you'll have a better idea, or you'll at least know as much as we know about that cask of whiskey. And as the years progress, they will update that NFT, additional information.
It's a pointer to the information, so when you get the information in, it's neat.
So we're actually on with that now. So at some point, you will receive this NFT. I don't know if it arrives by courier pigeon or something, but
it will probably sit next to my pictures of monkeys on my NFT thing.
Right,
the apes.
It is an interesting story because the distillers themselves often don't know the provenance of these casks and where they come from. Once they've filled them, it's one of several 100,000 potentially, or depending on the size of them. I was at Kilbeggan some years ago, and they was telling the story of the fact they have warehouse number 1, warehouse number 2, and we had an exclusive tour of warehouse number 1. And I was talking about Connemara, which is an Irish lightly smoked whiskey, and they were saying that they found a barrel and they had no idea what was in this barrel, and so it took them several weeks to work out what the barrel in. It turned out to be a long lost Connemara barrel that was over 22 years old. So me saying they should know everything about the barrel, at the bottom, the truth of the matter is it's a barrel in a room, and unless it's the paint stays on there and all that kind of stuff.
It's interesting that the barrels. I'll try. I mean, I get sort of into this sort of stuff. Obviously, this is something we sort of admire every day. But the barrels, the provenance, the history of the barrels, how we came to use these different barrel types. It's really interesting stuff. And more importantly, we talked about toasting and charring, and and the way that cask is treated prior to the spirit being put in there has such a profound effect on the way that the whiskey sort of matures, to the point where there are one or two cooperages that will tell you that it's their whiskey, not the distillery's.
Yeah, that is true. Yes, we on our Whiskey Ideas YouTube channel, our current odyssey is actually following the barrels.
Right.
So we kind of chase two or three whiskies, and they're always linked. And currently, it's the barrel. And on this one, we followed the one barrel that goes from Maker's Mark up through to Lafrague, and then ends up, bottling a French and an English whiskey. And
should be one of our. Maybe that's an idea for a podcast, Billy. Track a barrel.
Track a barrel.
Yeah.
Actually, and there's also a new children's game, and there's lots of shoot-offs on this investment. I think, track a barrel.
So, what cask have you guys actually bought then? I mean, I know this, but for the purposes.
Oh, you're going to ask us to remember. This is about looking at our podcast when I ask you a question.
I did just check.
Linkwood. For me, it was a Linkwood. It was a new make. I think it's now about 1.5 years old or 2 years old. I think it's in a bourbon first fill, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, this is so cool, man. You remember this.
So was it any particular reason you went for the Linkwood?
Because the salesman said it will make you most money.
No, it was kind of some elements just came together at that point. I had the money to make that investment. It came around. It's an interesting distillery because they don't bring out that much of their own. But that was kind of just some elements.
Understood.
Coming.
And I would imagine from your perspective as well, looking at it more with your sort of investor's cap on, the profile of the distillery wasn't perhaps as important as it was to Steve, because what you want obviously to be assured of is that you've got an asset there that's going to show you the best possible return.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The Linkwood is an excellent distillery, by the way, and it will be an excellent dram of whiskey, and you should absolutely 100% take a bottle out of that before you.
Forever the sales guy. Forever the sales guy.
So it is. It's one of my favourites. Yeah. It really is. I mean, we're going to be lucky enough to taste one of our bottlings, or you guys are, with the wine finish. It's pretty spectacular stuff.
So I went for the Ardmore. I wanted to go with something that I could play with quickly, so I didn't want to have to wait 3 years and a day to do something. So yes, the Ardmore 2010 distilling. So I think he's 11 years old.
Yeah, I have to confess. But that sounds about
good. Yeah. So that's fine. But yeah, so that was the Ardmore, which was nice. As I said, we were in Barcelona last night drinking, and sitting in the corner was an independent bottler version of Ardmore from 2008. It was near enough. So I've got some idea now what it might taste like.
How was it?
So I look forward to it. It was incredible, actually. It was very good.
Do you mind me asking where you were drinking last night?
We'll show you later tonight. If we get a chance after this, we'll take you. It's really good. Right. It was La Whiskeria.
La Whiskeria, yes.
You know
it. They're very good friends of ours, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they're great friends of ours.
Yeah, so that was that. And then the new one I can't remember because it was literally only last week and it wasn't on the site. So maybe you could tell me.
The Annandale. So Annandale, which is a new distillery. It's got a great history in terms of the site. Yeah, the old site there was originally a distillery there, which Robert Burns used to be the duty collector at the distillery. And on the estate of the distillery is the inn. I think it was the Globe Inn, actually, that he was famous for drinking at, and that's all on the estate of the Annandale distillery. And we actually talk to a lot of new distilleries, and a lot of these distilleries are producing phenomenal malts, which is great news for consumers, because what we're seeing now, which is obviously from an investment perspective is good news, with these older distilleries, they're attracting more and more of a premium. They've all got issues with supply and inventory. But those are traditionally the distilleries that we would deal with. But we do get approached, and we looked at Annandale, and I think it's David and Teresa. If it's Tessa, she'd be annoyed about that. But
give him hell.
And one thing that was apparent to us is that it's almost, I like to compare it with like sort of a Mercedes. Mercedes were always famous for their over-engineered cars, just a little bit more than was necessary. And it seems that they've taken this approach at the Annandale distillery. David has a background in the food industry, specifically developing flavour profiles, obviously.
Nice.
And I think he's been sort of quite well respected in his industry. And he's almost, from what I hear, reverse engineered his whiskey. So as opposed to it sort of just being a traditional lowland whiskey with its sort of traditional lowland characteristics, he's developed a whiskey that actually sort of fits most whiskey consumers' palates. So he's done something quite special there. And I did read that they were analysing the dust in the rafters just to get an idea of what had previously occurred in this building. One thing they established was that they must have had a peated whiskey expression at the distillery, because there were molecules of peat in the rafters.
Wow.
So they've subsequently got an unpeated and a peated expression, which is the man of words, Robert Burns, and the man of the sword, Robert the Bruce. Both of them apparently closely associated with the distillery. So yeah, we're quite excited about Annandale. I think
these are all great stories, and yet in 2 years' time they're not going to be attached to that barrel. So we have to find some way of getting that information in.
That's true.